You wake slowly to the sound of waves breaking against dark rocks. The air is cold and damp, carrying with it the sharp scent of seaweed and salt. You are lying on a rough woolen blanket in a small stone cottage on the Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland. The year is somewhere in the early 1700s, though exact dates matter little here. Time moves differently in these islands, where the wind never truly stops, and the sea surrounds everything you know. As you work, you think about the stories. Everyone here knows the stories. They are told on long winter nights when families gather around their peat fires, when the wind howls outside and the darkness presses against the small windows. The stories are about the creatures that live in and around these islands, beings that existed long before the people came and will exist long after. Some stories are about the Selkies, the seal people who can shed their skins and walk on land. Some are about the Trows, the small fairy folk who live in the mounds and hills. But the most frightening stories, the ones that make even the adults speak more quietly, are about the Nuckelavee. The Nuckelavee is not like the other creatures. It is not mischievous like the Trows or mysterious like the Selkies. It is purely destructive, purely terrible. Your grandmother, who died 2 winters ago, used to tell you about it. She would sit by the fire, her old hands working at spinning wool, and her voice would drop to barely above a whisper. The Nuckelavee, she said, comes from the sea. It is a sea demon, but unlike any other. When it emerges from the water and comes onto land, it brings disease and death and destruction with it. According to Magnus, his grandfather had been walking home late one night after visiting a neighbor. The moon was full, which was fortunate, because there are no streetlights here, no lamps to guide your way. The path led along the coast, as most paths do on these islands. His grandfather was walking steadily, thinking of his warm bed and his wife waiting at home, when he heard a sound from the direction of the sea. It was not the normal sound of waves. It was something else, something like breathing but larger and wetter. His grandfather stopped walking and listened. The sound continued, and then he heard another noise, like something heavy dragging across rocks. He knew he should turn back or hide, but curiosity held him in place. The moonlight was bright on the water, casting silver light across the dark sea. And then he saw it. The Nuckelavee was emerging from the water. Even from a distance, even in the uncertain moonlight, its form was clear and horrible. It was shaped somewhat like a horse and rider, but it was not two creatures. It was one being fused together in a grotesque mockery of a mounted man. But what made it most terrible was that it had no skin. You have heard this part of the story many times, and it never fails to make your stomach tighten. The Nuckelavee has no skin anywhere on its body. Its muscles are exposed, black and glistening. Its veins can be seen, pulsing with whatever foul substance flows through them instead of blood. The veins are yellow, like diseased fat, standing out against the red and black of the exposed flesh. The creature's head, both the horse head and the torso that grows from the horse's back, where a rider would sit, are skinless nightmares. The eyes are huge and bulging, and when the creature breathes, you can see its lungs working inside its chest. Magnus says his grandfather stood frozen, unable to move, as the Nuckelavee pulled itself fully onto land. The creature's breath was visible in the cold night air, coming out in great clouds of vapor that smelled of rot and disease. Where its feet touched the ground, the grass withered. The creature began moving along the shore, its horse legs carrying it with terrible speed, despite its grotesque appearance. His grandfather finally found the strength to move. There was a small stream nearby, and he ran to it and crossed it, splashing through the cold water to the other side. The Nuckelavee, following his scent or sensing his presence, came after him. But when it reached the stream, it stopped. It could not cross the fresh water. According to the old stories, the Nuckelavee cannot bear fresh water. It can only cross salt water and dry land. Even the smallest stream or ditch filled with fresh water will stop it. Magnus's grandfather stayed on the far side of the stream, watching the creature. The Nuckelavee stood at the water's edge, its terrible head swinging back and forth, its breath steaming in the cold air. After what seemed like hours, it finally turned and made its way back toward the sea. Magnus's grandfather watched until it disappeared into the waves, and then he ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. He never walked that path alone at night again. You reach your cottage with the water bucket and set it down inside the door. Your mother nods her thanks, busy now with preparing the morning meal. There is porridge made from oats, coarse and thick, sweetened slightly with a precious bit of honey that your father traded for last month. There is also bread, dark and heavy, made from barley flour. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth of the food in your belly. Your father comes in from tending the animals. He is a quiet man, weathered by years of hard work and harsh weather. His hands are rough and scarred, his face lined and reddened by constant wind. He sits down heavily and eats his portion of the meal without speaking. This is normal. People here do not waste words. Speech is saved for when it is needed, for telling stories or sharing important information. Idle chatter is rare. After the meal, there is work to be done. There is always work to be done. In the summer months, you must tend the small plot of land where your family grows barley and oats. The soil here is thin and poor and coaxing crops from it requires constant effort. You must also help with the animals, the cow, and the few sheep and chickens that provide milk and meat and eggs. In the winter, there is peat to be cut and dried for fuel, wool to be spun and woven, tools and clothes to be mended. As you work, moving stones and placing them carefully, you think again about the Nuckelavee. You cannot help it. The stories are always there in the back of your mind, shaping how you see the world around you. When you look at the sea, gray and endless and cold, you wonder what lies beneath its surface. When the wind picks up suddenly, making a strange sound as it blows through the rocks, you think of the creature's breath. When you find a dead sheep, which happens sometimes, you wonder if it died of natural causes or if something more sinister was involved. The Nuckelavee is blamed for many things. When crops fail, when animals sicken and die, when people fall ill with mysterious diseases, the Nuckelavee might be responsible. It is said to spread blight, a disease that kills crops, turning healthy plants black and rotten overnight. It is said to poison the water in some places, making cattle and sheep refuse to drink. It is said to carry pestilence in its very breath, so that anyone who comes too close to it will fall ill with a wasting sickness. But the Nuckelavee is not always present. Sometimes It stays in the sea for years at a time. There is another being, a powerful one, called the Mither of the sea, the mother of the sea. She is said to control the Nuckelavee during the summer months, keeping it chained deep beneath the waves where it cannot harm anyone. Only in the winter, when the Mither of the sea's power is weakest, can the Nuckelavee sometimes break free and come onto land. This is why the winter is the most dangerous time. Not just because of the cold and the storms and the short days, though these are all hard enough, but because the Nuckelavee might be abroad in the dark nights, moving across the islands, bringing sickness and death wherever it goes. People stay inside more during the winter. They avoid traveling alone or at night. They keep fresh water near their doors, in buckets and barrels, because the Nuckelavee cannot cross it. You work through the morning, lifting and placing stones until your back aches and your hands are scraped and sore. The sun remains hidden behind clouds, but you can track its movement by the gradual change in the light. The gray brightens slightly toward midday, then begins to dim again as afternoon approaches. Your father works beside you, steady and methodical, never hurrying, but never stopping. This is how work is done here, with patience and persistence. By early afternoon, a section of the wall is rebuilt. It is not finished, but enough progress has been made for today. Your father straightens up slowly, one hand going to his lower back. He looks at the wall, then at the sky, then nods. This means the work is satisfactory. He heads back toward the cottage, and you follow, your legs tired from all the bending and lifting. Your mother has prepared a simple midday meal of bread and cheese with some dried fish left from last autumn's catch. You eat outside, sitting on a large flat stone near the cottage door. The wind has picked up, blowing from the north, and it carries a sharper cold. The weather here changes quickly and without warning. A calm morning can turn into a howling gale by evening. A clear day can be followed by a week of rain and fog. After eating, you have a different task. Your mother needs seaweed for the fields. Seaweed gathered from the shore and spread on the thin soil helps the crops grow better. It is back-breaking work, hauling heavy loads of wet seaweed up from the beach, but it must be done. You take a large woven basket and head down to the shore. The tide is out now, exposing wide stretches of dark rock covered in barnacles and mussels. Long ribbons of seaweed lie everywhere, brown and olive green and deep red. Some varieties are better than others for the fields. You look for the thicker kinds, the ones your mother has taught you to recognize. You begin gathering them, pulling the slippery fronds loose and piling them into your basket. The work is cold and wet. Your hands grow numb quickly, and the sharp smell of the seaweed fills your nose and mouth. Small crabs scuttle away from you as you work, hiding in the crevices between rocks. Seabirds wheel overhead, calling to each other in their harsh voices. Gulls and terns and guillemots, always present, always watching for scraps or small fish in the tidal pools. As you gather seaweed, you see another figure working further down the beach. It is Inga, a girl about your age, from a cottage on the other side of the headland. She is doing the same work you are, filling her own basket with seaweed. You wave to her, and she raises a hand in return, but you do not walk over to talk. The distance is too far, and the work needs to be done. Besides, conversation is not something people here engage in casually. Words are for purpose, for necessity. But you think about Inga sometimes, more often than you think about other people. She has dark hair that she keeps tied back, and eyes the color of the sea on a rare sunny day. Last summer, at the midsummer gathering when several families came together to share food and stories, you sat near each other. You did not speak much, but there was something comfortable about her presence. You wonder if she thinks about you as well. But such things are not discussed openly here. The basket grows heavier as you fill it with seaweed. When it is full enough that you can barely lift it, you hoist it onto your back and begin the slow walk back to your cottage. The weight presses down on your shoulders, and the wet seaweed drips cold water down your back. But you keep walking. This is life here. It is hard and cold and demanding, but it is the only life you know. You make several trips down to the beach that afternoon, each time gathering more seaweed and carrying it back. Your mother spreads it on the field, laying it in rough lines between the young crop plants. The smell is strong, but it is a familiar smell, part of the rhythm of the seasons here. In a few weeks, the seaweed will have broken down somewhat, feeding the soil, and more can be added. As the afternoon wears on toward evening, You finish the seaweed gathering. Your back is sore, your hands are raw, and you are thoroughly cold and damp. But the work is done, at least for today. You go inside the cottage, where the peat fire has been burning steadily all day. The warmth is immediate and welcome, wrapping around you like a blanket. You stand close to the fire, letting the heat soak into your cold clothes and skin. Your mother is spinning wool, the spindle turning steadily in her practiced hands. The wool comes from your own sheep, sheared in the early summer, and then cleaned and carded and spun into thread. Later, it will be woven into cloth for clothes and blankets. Everything here is made by hand, created from the raw materials the islands provide. There are no shops, no markets where you can buy ready-made goods. If your family needs something, you make it yourselves, or trade with neighbors for it. Your father is mending a fishing line, his fingers working with careful precision to tie tiny knots. He fishes sometimes when the weather allows, taking a small boat out into the waters around the islands. The sea provides fish and shellfish, important additions to the limited diet available here. But fishing is dangerous work. The waters around the Orkneys are treacherous, with strong currents and sudden storms. Every few years, someone fails to return from a fishing trip, lost to the sea that both feeds and threatens the people here. As evening settles in, your mother prepares the final meal of the day. There is more porridge, this time made with some dried fish mixed in for flavor and substance. There is also some turnip, boiled until soft and mashed with a bit of butter. The meal is simple and plain, but it is hot and filling. You eat slowly, grateful for the warmth and sustenance. After the meal, the family sits around the fire. This is the time for talk, for stories, for the passing on of knowledge and tradition. Your father, usually so quiet during the day, begins to speak. He talks about the work that needs to be done in the coming days. The fishing boat needs repairs to its hull. The roof of the byre needs new thatch before winter. There are always tasks waiting, an endless list of maintenance and preparation. Then your mother speaks. She has been thinking about the Nuckelavee. She says it has been on her mind lately. She does not know why, but the thought of it has been troubling her. She reminds you and your father to always be careful near the sea at night, to never go out alone after dark, to always have fresh water nearby. These are things you already know, lessons you have learned since childhood, but she repeats them anyway. Repetition is how knowledge is preserved here, passed from generation to generation. Your father nods slowly. He remembers a time, he says, when he was a young man, perhaps 15 or 16 years old. There had been a bad year that winter. The crops had failed the previous summer, struck by some blight that turned the barley black in the fields. Several cattle had died of a mysterious sickness. People were hungry and afraid. The old people said it was the Nuckelavee, that the creature had been abroad on the island, spreading its poison. Your father had not believed the stories, not entirely. He thought they were just old superstitions, explanations for bad luck and natural disasters. But then he had found something on the beach one morning. He had been walking early, before dawn, checking on some fishing nets he had set. The tide was low and the beach was wide and dark. As he walked, he noticed that the seaweed and kelp in one area seemed different. It was not just lying naturally, as the tide had left it. It looked disturbed, crushed, as if something large had passed through it. And then he had seen the marks. They were prints in the wet sand and mud, preserved clearly in the pre-dawn light. They looked like hoof prints, but they were too large, much larger than any horse he had ever seen. And there was something wrong about them. Something that made his skin crawl even in the memory. The prints were accompanied by drag marks, as if something heavy had been pulled along between the footfalls. And where the prints led, he found dead things. A gull, lying on its side, its body already beginning to rot, though it could not have been dead for more than a few hours. Some mussels and barnacles on the rocks, all dead, their shells gaping open. Your father had followed the prints for a short distance. They led from the sea up onto the land, moving along the beach for perhaps 50 yards before turning back toward the water. He did not follow them far. Something about those prints, about the wrongness of them, filled him with a deep unease. He turned around and went back to his cottage. And he did not go out alone at night for many months after that. Was it the Nuckelavee he had found evidence of, or just some natural phenomenon he did not understand? Your father does not say definitively. He is not a man who claims to know things for certain, but he tells you that ever since that morning, he has taken the old stories more seriously. There are things in this world, he says, that cannot be easily explained. Better to be cautious than to be sorry. Your mother begins another story, One you have heard before, but do not mind hearing again. It is about a man named Tamas, who lived several generations ago on the island of Stronsay, one of the other Orkney Islands. Tamas was known as a bold man, perhaps too bold. Someone who did not show proper respect for the old ways and the old dangers. One night in winter, Tamas was riding his horse home from a celebration at a neighbor's house. He had drunk some whiskey, not a lot, but enough to make him feel brave and invincible. The night was cold and windy, but the moon was bright enough to see by. Tamas urged his horse along the coastal path, singing to himself, thinking of his warm bed waiting at home. As he rode, he began to smell something strange. It was a terrible smell, like rotting meat and stagnant water and disease all mixed together. His horse smelled it too, and began to shy and pull against the reins, trying to turn back. But Tamas, made bold by drink and stubbornness, forced the horse onward. The smell grew stronger, and then he heard the sound. He should have turned back, he knew it even then, some deep instinct telling him to flee. But curiosity and false courage held him in place. He climbed down from his horse and walked to the edge of the path where he could look down at the shore. The moonlight was bright on the water and the rocks, and there, on the beach below him, was the Nuckelavee. Your mother's voice drops lower as she describes what Tamas saw. The Nuckelavee was even more terrible than the stories had suggested. She says, the creature stood on the beach, its horse body facing the sea, its humanoid torso twisting around as if looking back toward the land. The moonlight revealed every horrible detail. The exposed muscles were black and glistening, like something that had been flayed alive. The yellow veins stood out in thick cords, pulsing visibly even from Tamas's vantage point above. The creature's head, the head of the horse portion, was enormous. Much larger than any normal horse's head. Its mouth hung open, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. The single eye, huge and round, rolled in its socket as the creature moved. From the horse's back, where the rider portion grew, another torso rose. This part had 2 arms, long and powerful, hanging down almost to the ground. The hands had fingers, but they were grotesquely elongated, like the fingers of something that had been stretched on a rack. The most terrible feature, your mother says, was the head of the rider portion. It was massive, far too large for the body, and it rolled from side to side on a neck that seemed barely able to support it. The mouth was wide, impossibly wide, and when the creature breathed, Tamis could see down into its throat, see the workings of its lungs in its open chest. The eye of the rider portion was even larger than the horse eye, and it seemed to glow with a faint, sickly light. Tamis stood frozen, watching the creature. The Nuckelavee was making a sound, a kind of low moaning that rose and fell with its breathing. It moved along the beach slowly, its hooves leaving deep prints in the sand. Where it walked, the seaweed withered and turned black. Small crabs that lived in the rocks scuttled away, and several that did not move fast enough were caught under the creature's hooves. When Tamis looked at these crushed crabs later, he found they had dissolved into a foul-smelling slime. The creatures seemed to be searching for something, moving back and forth along the beach, its great head swinging from side to side. Then it stopped and turned its gaze upward, directly toward where Tamis stood, the huge eye fixed on him, and Tamis felt a wave of cold terror wash over him. The creature had seen him. The Nuckelavee began to move toward the path, toward the way up from the beach to where Tamis stood. It moved with surprising speed, its horse legs carrying it in great leaping strides. Tamis finally found the strength to move. He ran back to his horse, which was already pulling against where he had tied it, desperate to flee. He fumbled with the reins, his hands shaking so badly he could barely untie the knot. The sound of the Nuckelavee was louder now, the wet breathing and the sound of its hooves on rock coming closer. Tamis got the reins free and threw himself onto his horse's back. The horse needed no urging. It took off at a gallop, racing along the path away from the creature. Tamis clung to its mane, not bothering with the reins, just holding on as the horse ran in blind panic. But the Nuckelavee was following. Tamis could hear it behind him, the sound of its pursuit clear in the night air. The breathing came in great, gasping bellows, and underneath that was another sound, a kind of rhythmic pounding as the creature's many feet struck the ground. Tamis's horse was fast, driven by terror, but the Nuckelavee was faster. It was gaining. Tamis remembered the stories then, remembered what his grandmother had told him. Fresh water. The Nuckelavee could not cross fresh water. There was a stream ahead, he knew, a small burn that ran down from the hills and crossed the path. If he could reach it, he might be saved. He urged his horse on, shouting and kicking, though the poor animal was already running as fast as it could. The stream came into view in the moonlight, a dark line crossing the lighter path. Tamas's horse gathered itself and leaped, jumping the stream in one bound. Tamas held on desperately, feeling himself slip sideways, but managing to stay mounted. The horse landed on the far side and kept running, but Tamas pulled it to a stop and turned to look back. The Nuckelavee had reached the stream. It stood at the edge, its massive form heaving with its breathing. It tried to cross, lifting one hoof and placing it toward the water. But as soon as the hoof touched the stream, the creature recoiled as if burned. It tried again at different points along the stream, but each time the result was the same. The fresh water was a barrier it could not cross. The creature stood there, and Tamas sat on his horse on the other side, both watching each other. Then the Nuckelavee opened its great mouth and made a sound, a terrible cry that was part roar and part wail. It was a sound of frustration and rage, echoing across the dark landscape. The cry went on, and Tamas felt his blood freeze at the sound of it. Finally, the Nuckelavee turned away. It moved back down toward the sea, its motion jerky and agitated. Tamas watched until it disappeared into the waves, and even then, he sat on his shaking horse for a long time, unable to move. Eventually, he made his way home, and when he arrived, his family said his hair had gone completely white, though he was only a young man. Whether this was literally true, or an embellishment added to the story over the years, your mother cannot say. But Tamas was changed from that night, she says. He became a cautious man, respectful of the old warnings. He never traveled alone at night again. He kept buckets of fresh water outside his door always, and he taught his children to do the same. And he told his story to anyone who would listen, a warning about the dangers that lurked in the dark places of the islands. The fire crackles softly as your mother finishes the story. Outside, the wind has grown stronger. You can hear it shrieking around the cottage, and occasionally a stronger gust makes the whole building shudder slightly. The storm is here now, rain beginning to patter against the small window. These winter storms can last for days, trapping people inside their homes, cutting off the scattered families from each other. You wake sometime in the deep night. The fire has burned very low. just glowing embers now, casting almost no light. The storm is still raging outside, perhaps even stronger than before. Something has woken you. Some sound or sensation you cannot quite identify. You lie still, listening, trying to understand what disturbed your sleep. Then you hear it. Over the sound of the wind and rain, there is something else. A rhythmic sound, like heavy breathing, but not quite human. It is coming from outside, from somewhere near the cottage. Your heart begins to pound. You tell yourself it is just the wind, making strange sounds as it blows through rocks or around the corner of the building. But the sound continues, regular and deliberate, not matching the random gusts of the storm. You want to get up, to wake your parents, but fear keeps you frozen in your blanket. The breathing sound seems to move, circling around the cottage. You hear something else now, too. A kind of scraping sound, like something being dragged across the ground. Your mind immediately goes to the stories, to the description of the Nuckelavee's dragging gait. The sound comes to the door. You hear it clearly now. Right outside, just beyond the wooden planks and the bar that holds them closed. The breathing is louder, wetly labored, and underneath it you hear a kind of snuffling, as if something is smelling at the crack under the door. The cottage suddenly feels very small and fragile. The stone walls and wooden door seeming like no protection at all against whatever is outside. Then you remember the water, the bucket of fresh water sitting just inside the door. The Nuckelavee cannot cross fresh water. If something is really out there, the water is a barrier, a protection. You cling to this thought like a lifeline, repeating it to yourself. The water will keep it out. The water will keep it away. You rise from your blanket, stiff and tired from your sleepless night. Your mother is already up, coaxing the fire back to life, adding small pieces of dried heather and peat to the embers. Your father sits on the edge of the bed alcove, pulling on his boots. The cottage is cold, the fire having burned too low during the night, and your breath makes small clouds in the air. You want to tell them about the sounds you heard, but something holds you back. In the gray morning light, with the familiar routine of the day beginning, the terror of the night seems less certain. Maybe it really was just the wind, just the storm playing tricks. You do not want to seem foolish, afraid of nothing. So you say, nothing helping your mother with the morning tasks. Instead, as the day wears on, the storm begins to ease. The wind drops from a howl to a steady blow, and the rain becomes intermittent rather than constant. By afternoon, your father decides it is safe enough to go and check on old Magnus, who lives alone in a cottage about a mile away. In weather like this, it is important to check on neighbors, especially the old ones who live alone. Magnus is tough and capable despite his age, but anything could happen in a storm. Your father asks if you want to come along, and you agree immediately. Anything is better than staying cooped up inside the cottage. You both dress in your warmest clothes and oilskin cloaks that shed water reasonably well. Your mother packs some bread and cheese for Magnus, who lives simply and may not have much food stored. As you walk, you notice something strange. There is a smell in the air, underneath the normal sense of rain and sea and earth. It is a foul smell, like something rotting. You mention it to your father, and he nods. He smells it too. His face looks troubled, but he does not say anything, just walks faster. You reach the area where the path runs close to the shore. This is where you must be most careful, as the wind is stronger here with no hills to break it. The sea is rough, great gray waves crashing against the rocks, sending spray high into the air. The beach is littered with debris thrown up by the storm. Seaweed, driftwood, dead fish, and other things less identifiable. Your father stops suddenly, holding up a hand to halt you as well. He is looking at something on the beach below. You follow his gaze and see what has caught his attention. There are marks in the sand and mud, partially washed away by the rain but still visible. They look like tracks of some kind, but they are huge, much larger than any animal you know. Your father scrambles down from the path to the beach, and you follow carefully. Up close, the tracks are even more disturbing. They are hoof-shaped but massive, each print nearly the size of your father's head. Between the hoof prints are drag marks, deep furrows in the sand, and along the path of the tracks you see dead things, seabirds lying twisted and broken, fish that look half dissolved, their flesh falling away from their bones. Seaweed turned black and slimy. The smell is stronger here, emanating from the path of the tracks. It is a smell of decay and disease turning your stomach. Your father kneels and examines the tracks closely, his face grim. He touches one of the prints lightly, then jerks his hand back as if stung. Even the ground where the tracks lie seems wrong somehow, darker and more lifeless than the surrounding sand. Your father stands and looks around, following the line of tracks with his eyes. They come from the sea, move up onto the beach, travel along parallel to the shore for some distance, and then turn inland. They cross the beach and climb up toward the path you were just walking on. Your father's face goes very still, and you know he is thinking the same thing you are. These tracks lead toward where you live, toward the scattered cottages, including your own. You follow the tracks back to the path. They cross it, moving inland, and you can see them continuing into the rough grass and heather beyond. Your father hesitates, clearly debating whether to follow them further. But Magnus is still waiting, still needs to be checked on. Your father makes a decision. You will continue to Magnus's cottage first, make sure he is all right, and then follow the tracks to see where they lead. You walk faster now, both of you anxious. The wind seems colder, the gray sky more oppressive. Magnus's cottage comes into view, a small dark shape hunched against the landscape. Smoke is rising from the roof hole, which is a good sign. It means Magnus has his fire going, is probably safe inside. Your father calls out as you approach, the traditional courtesy to let someone know you are coming. There is no answer. Your father calls again louder, and this time you hear a response from inside Magnus's voice, weak but present. Your father pushes open the door and you both enter. Magnus is sitting by his fire, wrapped in blankets despite the heat. He looks older than you remember, more shrunken and frail. His face is pale and his hands shake as he reaches out in greeting. Your father asks if he is well, and Magnus shakes his head slowly. He had a bad night, he says, a very bad night. The storm frightened him, Magnus admits, which is unusual. He has lived through countless storms in his long life and never feared them. But last night was different. He heard sounds outside his cottage. Sounds that were not just the wind. Breathing sounds and scraping and something that might have been words, but in a language he did not recognize. The sounds circled his cottage for what seemed like hours. Your stomach tightens as Magnus speaks. These are the same sounds you heard outside your own cottage. You glance at your father and see that he has made the connection too. Whatever it was, it visited multiple cottages last night, moving across the island in the darkness and the storm. Magnus had been too frightened to look outside, he says with some shame in his voice. He is an old man, he explains, and fear comes easier now than it once did. He stayed by his fire, keeping it burning bright, and he splashed water from his bucket under his door, creating a small barrier. The water seemed to help, he says. After he did that, the sounds outside became more agitated, more frustrated, but they did not come any closer. Eventually, they moved away. Your father shares what you found on the beach, describing the tracks and the dead things. Magnus listens, his pale face growing even paler. He knows what it means, he says quietly. The Nuckelavee was abroad last night. It came up from the sea during the storm, when the Mither of the sea's power is weakest, and it moved across the island. Why it came, or what it wanted, Magnus cannot say. The Nuckelavee's purposes are unknowable, driven by malevolence and hunger that humans cannot understand. Your father gives Magnus the food your mother sent, and makes sure he has enough peat for his fire and water for his needs. Magnus thanks you both, but he asks you to do something else as well. He asks you to go to the other cottages in the area, check on the families there, and warn them. If the Nuckelavee was out last night, it might come again tonight or tomorrow night. People need to be careful, need to take precautions. Your father agrees. You leave Magnus's cottage and begin making the rounds of the neighbors. The afternoon wears away as you walk from cottage to cottage across the wet and windswept landscape. At each place you share what you found and what Magnus said. The reactions are similar everywhere. Fear, but not disbelief. Everyone here knows the stories. Everyone here knows that the stories are not just tales told to frighten children. At some cottages, people report that they, too, heard strange sounds last night. At others, they say their animals were disturbed, the cattle lowing, and the sheep huddling together more than usual. One family found 3 of their chickens dead in the morning, lying in the small coop behind their cottage with no apparent cause of death. When they examined the birds, they found the flesh already starting to rot, as if they had been dead for days, rather than ours. The sun is setting. What little light penetrated the clouds is fading fast by the time you and your father return to your own cottage. Your mother has kept the fire burning and has prepared food, a stew made from turnips and barley, and a bit of salted mutton. You eat gratefully, the hot food restoring some warmth to your cold and tired body. That evening, there is little storytelling. Instead, there is preparation. Your father checks every part of the cottage, making sure there are no gaps where anything could enter. He reinforces the bar on the door with an extra piece of wood. Your mother fills every container with fresh water, placing them near the door and the small window. She even sprinkles water on the threshold, creating a damp barrier across the doorway. These preparations are done methodically, without panic, but with serious purpose. This is how people here deal with danger, with practical action and careful attention to the old wisdom. You help where you can, learning these rituals of protection, understanding that they may one day save your life. As night falls completely, the storm picks up again. The wind returns with renewed force, and the rain hammers against the cottage walls. You huddle close to the fire with your parents, no one suggesting that it is time to sleep. Sleep seems impossible anyway. With the knowledge of what might be out there in the darkness, your father begins to talk, his voice low and thoughtful. He speaks about the nature of the islands, about the thin boundary here between the known world and the other world. The Orkneys have always been a place where things from beneath the sea and from older times can still manifest. The islands are ancient, he says, older than human memory. Long before people came here, other beings existed in this place. Most of them have faded or retreated into the deep places, but some remain. The Nuckelavee is one of the oldest things, your father says. It existed before the first people settled these islands, and it will likely exist long after people are gone. It is not evil in the way humans understand evil. It is something more fundamental, more elemental. It is disease and decay and death given form, a force of nature rather than a conscious being with intentions and goals. This does not make it less dangerous, he adds. If anything, it makes it more dangerous because it cannot be reasoned with or appealed to. The only defense is avoidance and protection. Stay inside at night. Keep fresh water nearby. Respect the old warnings. These simple rules have kept people safe for generations, and they will continue to keep people safe if they are followed. As the hours pass, exhaustion finally begins to overcome fear. Your eyes grow heavy despite your determination to stay awake. Your father notices and tells you to sleep. He and your mother will keep watch, taking turns through the night. You need your rest, he says. Tomorrow there will be more work to do, more checking on neighbors, more precautions to take. Life continues even in the presence of danger. This is another lesson of the islands. You adapt. You endure. You keep going. You lie down on your blanket, close to the fire. The warmth and the sound of your parents' quiet voices are comforting. Outside, the storm rages, and somewhere out there in the darkness, perhaps the Nuckelavee moves across the bleak landscape, its terrible form unseen in the night. But inside this small stone cottage, there is light and warmth and the presence of family. There is protection, imperfect but real.